Did you know that approximately 1 out of every 59 children are diagnosed with autism? I was unaware of these statistics for most of my life. Autism, by definition, is a developmental disorder characterized by difficulty in social interaction and communication and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. At a young age, I was introduced to autism in my own personal family. My brother was diagnosed around the age of 2. Not only did the diagnosis of my brother affect him, but it affected my family as a whole. However, autism is much more common than most people think. So many kids go their entire life without ever being diagnosed. These are the reasons why I'm discussing autism today, and I want everyone to leave here today with the ability to find their own way of discovering it in children around them. You will be able to do this because I'm going to explain the broadness of it, describe the early signs, and clarify some common false assumptions. Autism is a much broader subject than just the word and what it seems. It is based on a spectrum, and depending where someone falls on that spectrum determines their form of autism. Some have poor, if any, functioning communication skills. Others may have adequate communication but lack of fine motor skills. All children on the spectrum are different. According to Autism Speaks, it is all based around conditions like social skills, repetitive behavior, speech, nonverbal, and verbal communication. I know this was mentioned in the definition that I stated earlier, but in more specific detail, it consists of things like their social skills, so their interactions around other children, their interactions around adults, just people in general. And repetitive behavior can consist of a lot of times a schedule. So many kids with autism are set to schedule and structure, so they have a very repetitive behavior that they're used to. And when that schedule is broken or when that repetition doesn't follow how it does every day, it can cause a trigger in them. Fine motor skills, like simple things that most children should be able to do, like ride a bike and tie their shoes. Since we have defined exactly what it is and given some clarification, it's easier to discuss discovering those symptoms and how it's found in the early stages of children. The signs of autism can be discovered as early as 6 months old. Children aren't typically diagnosed that young, but there are still signs that you can watch for. Autism Speaks has good information on this particular topic of discussion as well. They state that the most notable signs at this young of an age can be lacking eye contact and not having engaging expressions. Around 9 months old, one of the biggest things is a child not making normal sounds that a normal child that age makes. This leads to the communication problems with autistic children. If you have a child that's making no noise whatsoever, that's typically something that causes a worry that I may need to look into something because they're falling behind in the steps of communication and the steps of their development as a baby. So, when discussing the points of discovering autism, there are also many misconceptions and assumptions that are very common. I'm talking about this now because when discussing the signs as an early child and babies growing up, it is easy for parents to get scared. In an article written about autism by Ming-Chun Lee, she mentioned something I found very informative about how autism has become much more commonly diagnosed and commonly found based on realization. So more people are aware of what it is, more people know the signs and symptoms and things to look for that I'm discussing now. Therefore, it's become more common and children are no longer going without being diagnosed. Another source I found very helpful is a book on autism written by Gary B. Mezanov. And in his book, he mentions, it's a very small part, but it mentions how a teacher is working with a student in her class who has autism. That is a big part of autism because it's something teachers need to be informed of because, like I've mentioned, autistic kids are capable of being 100% functional people, and most of them are incredibly smart. Therefore, they need benefits that all the normal children are getting. So teachers need to know the best way to teach them in order for them to get 100% out of school. People have made assumptions over time when they hear the word autism. The things they think are typically based on the portrayal of autism on TV and even just things that people have said over time. You definitely can't trust everything that you see and that you hear. One common assumption that I hear a lot and have experienced myself personally is that people with autism don't have the ability to make friends and don't want to. As I mentioned earlier, when my brother was first diagnosed with autism and my parents found out about it, their biggest fear was that he was never going to make friends and he was always going to be considered weird or he would be bullied throughout his entire school career. It's not because children with autism don't want to make friends, it's more that they don't really know how. It's something that they have to learn and that all of them do different. Some have good communication skills and others don't. So the kids who have no verbal communication are going to struggle a lot more with making friends. However, I know from my personal experiences that that is definitely not always the case. My little brother has went to school his entire life in public school and he loves school, he has friends, has good communication skills, but it's knowing exactly how to use them and how to implement them the right way to people. In all, we have discussed the factual definition, how it is discovered, and many things that are assumed about autism but not completely true. Nobody chooses to have autism and nobody chooses not to have it. It is no different than being diagnosed with cancer or being born with Down syndrome or even being born with the color of your skin. You can't change it and that's okay. Kids and adults with autism have the capability of being fully functional, like I've mentioned multiple times. They may be different and people may see them as weird, but always remember that there's not anything they can do about it. If everyone in the audience today is able to leave with at least the realization that autism is common and doesn't have to be a bad thing, I would be happy.